I am CTO of the British Medical Journal. I'm going to talk about comorbidities and a tool we've developed to help doctors treat patients with comorbidities and why it's important. I'll just start by telling you three things about the British Medical Journal. We're owned by the British Medical Association, which is the union of doctors in the UK. We were founded in 1840, and we're one of the organizations that co-run medRxiv. We have a mission to create a healthier world. So in my pitch, I was talking about why sick people are really sick. And one of the reasons why sick people are really sick is because they often have more than one condition that they come to the hospital with or their doctor with. And this is called comorbidities. And the challenge with comorbidities, I think the key message here is clinical research has a publication bias against investigating people who are sick with more than one thing because it's complicated and it makes getting your results very difficult to interpret. So as a result, from publication all the way through to the medical education that we publish, they only look at conditions in terms of one thing at a time, whereas most people actually are sick who are sick with more than one condition. And this is a quote from Chris Whitty, who's the Chief Medical Officer for England. He said, training from medical school onwards for clinical teams and clinical guidelines all tend to be organized along a single disease or single organ lines. And for him, this was a big issue that we have to deal with in medical education. Here's another data point. About 5% of the population consume about 1/3 of the clinical resource, and these people tend to have comorbidities. So it's a really key problem that our medical educational system doesn't have good resources to address. 1 in 3 adults suffer from multiple conditions in the UK, and 1 in 3 adults admitted to hospital in an emergency have more than 5 conditions, but resources tend to focus only on single conditions. So we've created a tool to help support medical professionals, which gives them treatment algorithms for conditions that they see in the hospital. And we've invested in trying to make that work for comorbidities too. So the way it works is we monitor about 10,000 published clinical guidelines globally. We have a team of about 20 clinical editors. They update guidance in over 1,000 topics. We mark that content up using a variety of different markup schemes. And then here's just some examples of that markup. It goes down to things like information about the factor, information about the individual, what kind of patient group they're in. And now what this clinical group have started to do is take the 10 most common comorbidities, hypertension, heart failure, stroke, depression, diabetes, asthma, and modify the advice we're given to doctors based on these kinds of very, very common comorbidities that patients in hospitals have. And even though we're only looking at these 10, it's leading to a very large variety of the types of advice on the base 1,000 conditions that we deal with in the tool. And a very, very simple example is steroids. Prescriptions of steroids is very common in many treatments, but how you treat people with steroids has to be dealt with very carefully based on one of the kinds of comorbidities that they may have. The tool allows clinicians to pick the comorbidities of their patient and then modifies the advice that they're given based on the comorbidity that the patient might be presenting with. So we think and hope that this will improve patient outcomes. 77% of clinicians who use the tool have changed the treatment that they have chosen to apply to their patient based on the information we're giving them. So we have evidence that it's actually changing behavior, hopefully to lead to better outcomes. We have a couple of how might we's that we're thinking about at the moment with the product. How might we automate that pipeline of checking those 10,000 sources to streamline that is one. We have this rich tagging. How might we create maybe a knowledge graph to support automating how we improve recommendations in our tool is another area of investigation. And finally, we're trying to work with a couple of startups to understand how we can get closer to individual patient records to give personalized advice for treatments. That's it. Thank you very much.